Since then, you've seen there's a new kind of vengeance in the air, which has affected policymakers in many different parts of the world. So whether it's in the United States itself, where 800,000 people were detained on mere suspicion that they might be involved with terrorism, or in large parts of Western Europe, where civil liberties have been badly violated and enriched in laws that allow for long periods of detention without trial, that allow for virtually summary execution, the kind you saw after the London Underground bombings, and a whole series of assaults on citizens' freedoms, including their privacy, especially very close to levels of people and so on. These processes are getting generalized. In some ways, the agenda, or even though the neocons are in retreat, and some of them have actually started deserting the old gang, including Francis Fukuyama, their agenda seems to be still very, very strong the world over. The sabotage of the United Nations continues, the manipulation continues with a great deal of complicity from other powerful states. The pursuit of the so-called global war on terror is hardly resisted by any of the powerful states. They all want to be part of it in some way. The United States prevailed upon the rest of the world to pass national legislation allowing for specific measures to facilitate counter-terrorism. And many countries, more than half the countries of the world, have already passed such laws, including very draconian laws. If you recall, POTA, an earlier POTO, the ordinance in India, was inspired directly by 9/11. And we're seeing the results of that even now. But I think the real triumph, in some ways, of the neoconservatives and the right lies at the level of ideas. In fact, they've been able to actually generalize an Islamophobic counter-terrorism agenda in many countries of the world, including this one. If you look at the fundamental assumptions on which India's counter-terrorism strategy has been based and shaped by people like N.K. Narayanan, the National Security Advisor, the presumptions are largely Islamophobic and largely American in origin. In fact, you can point to specific writers of the worst kind of anti-Islamic build, who build theories about how Islam in particular and suicide bombing are structurally related. They're inseparably related. And these are the kinds of ideas that Narayanan himself gave vent to at a conference of police officers, an international conference of police officers at the end of 2001, when he was no longer in service. And he cites exactly those same crazy ideologues, Islamophobic ideologues, about how suicide bombing in Islam has a specific significance. It sacralizes violence. And this sacralization of violence and the emergence of the martyr as a pure being out of the fire of violence gives Islamic terrorism a specifically malign force, which lacks in other forms. Obviously, I haven't heard of the NPT, which is probably the most, if you like, the most accomplished practitioner of suicide bombing in the world. But nevertheless, he said all this, and they told the West, look, we've suffered exactly from the same terrorism that you people are now beginning to sense, and then proceeded to end his speech by evoking and chanting the Gayatri Mantra. This man sits today at the top of our government security establishment as the National Security Advisor. Right? The whole presumption is that there is an inherent link between Islam and terrorism, and that's the way we have conducted our entire counter-terrorism strategy in this country. And I think this, in some sense, is the biggest triumph, and the whole idea of punishment, of the use of force, the complete intolerance of the freedom of individuals and their right to defense in a fair trial, I think, are all deeply connected to the ideological influence of the right that has grown, especially in this country, and that's a serious cause for worry. And I think we today face a very, very grim threat. That threat is that some of the biggest achievements in terms of long fought for and hard-won freedoms, democratic rights, entitlements, and so on, are seriously being eroded. The whole achievement of the 20th century in terms of accepting human rights as universal and indivisible, accepting limits even on the notion of national sovereignty by questioning the Westphalian notion going back to the 17th century, accepting limits on the use of certain kinds of weapons and so on. All those achievements today are in danger of being liquidated in the name of fighting terrorism, acquiring security, and punishing crime, and so on and so forth. And I think it's this context that sets the minds of the judges who sit on these trials. It's these mindsets then that influence people in the media and large sections of the middle class. And that's what is producing this particularly murderous form of the Bhagalpur syndrome today, where there's no sensitivity to fake encounter killings of people, to thousands of people being detained for long periods of time, even now in Gujarat, and so on. I think it's very important that books like this are actually written and generalized and spread so that a different kind of awareness can be generated. Thank you.